A life spiraling the early years of Yukio Yamaji. Yukio Yamaji's story is a harrowing journey into the darkest corners of the human psyche. His life, marked by a series of unfortunate events and personal tragedies, paints a grim picture of a young man lost in a world that seemed to offer him no solace. Born in 1983, his early life was marred by hardship. The bustling streets of Yamaguchi City, Japan, were a stark contrast to the turmoil that brewed within his home. Growing up in Yamaguchi City, Japan, Yamaji faced the sting of poverty. The neighborhood he called home was a testament to the economic struggles that many families, including his own, endured. Tragedy struck when he was just a boy, losing his father to cirrhosis of the liver. This devastating loss left a void that would never be filled, casting a long shadow over his formative years. This loss cast a long shadow over Yamaji's life, contributing to a growing sense of isolation and despair. The young boy, once full of potential, began to retreat into himself, finding solace only in his own company. Yamaji's troubles deepened as he navigated adolescence. The transition from childhood to teenage years was fraught with challenges that only seemed to compound his existing grief. He struggled to find his footing, grappling with a tumultuous home life and academic difficulties. School, which should have been a place of learning and growth, became yet another battleground. The absence of a stable father figure left a void in his life, and his relationship with his mother grew increasingly strained. Arguments became a daily occurrence, each one chipping away at the fragile bond they once shared. By the time Yamaji reached his teens, his life was a powder keg of resentment, anger, and simmering rage, waiting for a spark to ignite it. The emotional turmoil he experienced was palpable, manifesting in frequent outbursts and a brooding demeanor. The seeds of violence were sown early in Yamaji's life, nurtured by a toxic combination of personal tragedy, social isolation, and unchecked anger. These elements intertwined, creating a perfect storm that would eventually lead to his downfall. As he grew older, these seeds took root, slowly but surely poisoning his mind and setting him on a collision course with fate. The once innocent child was now a young man teetering on the edge of a dark abyss. The world would come to know Yukio Yamaji not as a victim of circumstance, but as a perpetrator of horrific violence, forever linked to the brutal crimes that would define his short and tragic life. His story serves as a grim reminder of how unchecked pain and anger can lead to devastating consequences. The matricide, a brutal act, a troubled mind. On a sweltering July day in 2000, the simmering tensions in the Yamaji household reached a boiling point. The oppressive heat seemed to mirror the escalating conflict within the walls of their modest home, where arguments had become a daily occurrence. Yukio Yamaji, just 16 years old, committed an act of unimaginable violence. He murdered his own mother. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision, but rather the culmination of years of pent-up anger and frustration. The weapon of choice was a metal baseball bat, a chilling symbol of the brutality that unfolded within the walls of their modest home. The bat, once a tool for recreation, had now become an instrument of death. The details of the crime sent shockwaves through the community. Neighbors who had known the family for years were left in a state of disbelief, struggling to reconcile the horrific act with the boy they thought they knew. Yamaji's mother, a woman struggling to make ends meet and provide for her troubled son, became the victim of his pent-up rage. She had worked tirelessly, juggling multiple jobs to support her family, yet her efforts were met with a tragic end. The once quiet home was now a crime scene, forever stained by the horrific act that had taken place. The yellow police tape fluttered in the breeze, a stark reminder of the violence that had shattered the peace of this suburban neighborhood. In the aftermath of the matricide, Yamaji's actions revealed a chilling detachment. He showed no signs of remorse or guilt, his face a mask of indifference as he recounted the events to the authorities. He calmly called the authorities, confessing to the crime with a disturbing lack of remorse. His voice was steady, almost emotionless, as he described the brutal act he had committed. His explanation for the murder was a chilling glimpse into his troubled mind. He spoke of feeling trapped and suffocated by his mother's constant presence and her overbearing nature. Yamaji claimed his mother's constant silent phone calls to a girl he had feelings for drove him to the brink. He felt betrayed and humiliated, his emotions spiraling out of control with each unanswered call. He also cited her mounting debts as a source of frustration, painting a picture of a young man overwhelmed by anger and resentment. The financial strain added to the already volatile atmosphere in the household, pushing him further towards the edge. It was a confession that left investigators and the public alike grappling with the depths of Yamaji's depravity. The community was left to ponder how a young boy could harbor such darkness, and what could have been done to prevent such a tragedy. In the days that followed, the community came together to mourn the loss of a mother and to seek solace in each other. Candlelight vigils were held, and flowers were laid at the doorstep of the Yamaji home, a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating impact of unchecked anger. As for Yukio Yamaji, he was taken into custody and placed in a juvenile detention center. His future now uncertain, he faced the consequences of his actions, a young life forever altered by a moment of unimaginable violence. The trial that followed was a somber affair, with the courtroom filled with a mix of grief and anger. The judge and jury listened intently as the details of the case were laid bare, each revelation more shocking than the last. In the wake of the tragedy, the community also began to focus on mental health awareness and support for troubled youth. Outreach programs were established, aiming to prevent such a devastating event from ever happening again. As the sun set over the suburban neighborhood, there was a sense of quiet reflection. The events of that sweltering July day would never be forgotten, serving as a stark reminder of the importance of addressing mental health issues and the devastating consequences of unchecked anger. A short-lived reprieve, Yamaji's parole, and the shadows of the past. Despite the gravity of his crime, Yamaji's young age at the time of the murder resulted in a more lenient sentence than one might expect. The court took into account his youth and the potential for rehabilitation, hoping that time and guidance could steer him away from a path of further violence. He was convicted of matricide but granted parole after serving only 3 years of his sentence. The decision was controversial, sparking debates about the balance between justice and mercy, and whether such a short sentence could truly reform someone who had committed such a heinous act. In October 2003, Yamaji walked out of prison a free man, given a second chance at life that many felt he didn't deserve. The media coverage was intense, with reporters and cameras capturing his every move, adding to the pressure and scrutiny he faced upon his release. However, the shadows of his past followed Yamaji closely. Every step he took was haunted by the memory of his crime, and the public's perception of him as a murderer. The stigma was inescapable, a constant reminder of the life he had taken and the trust he had shattered. The weight of his crime, the memory of his mother's brutal end, continued to haunt him. Night after night he was plagued by nightmares and guilt, unable to find peace or solace. The psychological scars ran deep, affecting his every waking moment. He struggled to reintegrate into society, finding it difficult to hold down a job or form meaningful connections. Employers were wary of his past, and potential friends and partners were scared off by his history. Isolation became his new prison, one without bars but equally confining. The world viewed him with suspicion and fear, a constant reminder of the horrific act he had committed. Whispers followed him wherever he went, and the judgmental glances of strangers made it clear that forgiveness was not easily granted. Yamaji's parole was a double-edged sword. It offered him freedom, but also placed him under a microscope, where every misstep could lead to his downfall. The pressure to prove himself worthy of this second chance was immense. On one hand, it offered him a chance at redemption, a path to rebuild his life. There were moments of hope, where he envisioned a future where he could make amends and contribute positively to society. Support from a few compassionate individuals gave him the strength to keep trying. On the other, it unleashed a deeply troubled individual back into society, a young man still grappling with the demons that had driven him to murder. The internal battle was relentless, and the fear of succumbing to his darker impulses was ever present. The justice system had given Yamaji a second chance, but had it done enough to ensure the safety of others, to prevent him from succumbing to the darkness that still lurked within? The measures in place for his rehabilitation were questioned, and the adequacy of his support network was a topic of concern. The answer, tragically, would soon become all too clear. The consequences of his release would unfold in a manner that would leave a lasting impact on all those involved, raising questions about the true nature of justice and redemption. Section 4. The Osaka Murders, a Descent into Further Darkness. 2 years after his release from prison, Yukio Yamaji's life took another sinister turn. He drifted to Osaka, a bustling metropolis that became the backdrop for his descent into further darkness. It was here in November 2005 that Yamaji committed his second and third murders, solidifying his status as a cold-blooded killer. The victims were two sisters, Asuka and Chihiro Uehara, aged 27 and 19 respectively. They were strangers to Yamaji, their paths crossing randomly in the labyrinthine city. Yamaji targeted the sisters in their own apartment, subjecting them to a horrific ordeal of violence. He raped Asuka before fatally stabbing both sisters, their lives brutally extinguished in their own home. As if driven by a primal urge, Yamaji attempted to cover his tracks by setting the apartment ablaze. He fled the scene, leaving behind a trail of devastation and heartbreak. The Osaka murders sent shockwaves through Japan, shattering any illusion that Yamaji was a reformed man. He had proven himself to be a danger to society, a predator incapable of empathy or remorse. The hunt for the killer was on, and this time there would be no leniency, no second chances. Section 5. I wanted to see human blood, Yamaji's chilling confession. The manhunt for Yukio Yamaji gripped the nation. Police worked tirelessly, piecing together clues, following leads, determined to bring the killer to justice. Their efforts paid off on December 5, 2005, when Yamaji was apprehended. The arrest brought a sense of relief, but did little to prepare anyone for the chilling confession that would follow. During his interrogation, Yamaji confessed to the Osaka murders with a chilling matter-of-factness. He recounted the events leading up to the killings, the brutal attack, and the subsequent arson, his words sending shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. But it was one particular statement, uttered with a chilling calmness, that provided the most disturbing insight into Yamaji's psyche.